I might be the odd one out here, but I honestly like this latest chapter of Boruto. I'm probably biased because it confirms several of my theories, but despite being a very calm, dialogue-heavy chapter with almost no action whatsoever, it had a good flow as it pushed the story forward. So let's go through the various narrative elements this chapter continued to build upon and some of the plot foreshadowing. So at the start of the chapter, Sarada is reflecting upon Sumere's words from the previous chapter, where Sumere asks Sarada if she ever considered her or Boruto's feelings, and if she ever tried putting herself in Boruto's shoes at any moment. Now nothing further happens in this particular chapter, but this is clearly going to be a longer narrative thread for Sarada to reflect on, and I imagine this will apply to Sumere and possibly even Eida as well. Now the plot actually begins with Matsuri and Ryu discussing Kashin Koji's toes, and you guys seriously need to check out my recent video about Matsuri's abilities, because this chapter absolutely hints in the direction of what I discussed in that video, as Matsuri is outright stated by Yodo to appear to have sensory abilities, and Matsuri is literally able to quote-unquote hear the trees' voices to track Boruto, even the trees that are apparently deep below ground. I believe this is an application of Moegi's apparent ability to read thoughts, so seriously, check out that video after this review. In any case, this is very minor and probably not going to be super important long term, but it feels like they're setting up a romance between Yodo and Shinki, unless it's just meant to be a sibling type relationship. But Araya seems to fear that Yoda will be particularly reckless in their quest to save Shinki. Unlike Araya himself, who's also on their team, it would likely share that same sibling-like bond with Yodo and Shinki. And considering that love is clearly the theme of the arc with Sarada and Sumere's feelings for Boruto, Eida's character arc in general, and Matsuri's romantic feelings for Konohamaru, I definitely think they're setting up something similar between Yodo and Shinki. But anyway, yeah, Matsuri is in love with Konohamaru, and I thought it was pretty funny. The juxtaposition of Matsuri, who's in love but doesn't fully understand the weight of that emotion, with Ryu, who's completely oblivious, was genuinely funny. It's kind of like chapter 74 part 1 humor-wise, and narratively, this actually has a lot of substance. First, it exemplifies something I've been saying for a while, which is that among the Shinju, Matsuri is the only one who appears to have developed empathy. Each Shinju, at least as of right now, seems to have developed a different aspect of humanity, and Matsuri is not only able to feel strong emotions towards others, but be able to understand the emotions of others, as we see in chapter 5 when she feels Konohamaru and Teen 10's sadness and rage, and in chapter 15 when she feels Shinki's strong devotion towards Gaara. Part of that may be due to Moegi's apparent ability to read thoughts, but either way, this is the end result. Matsuri has developed empathy. I've still yet to make this video, but just like the other Shinju, I sense many strong similarities in writing parallels to the Royal Guard of the Chimera Ants in Hunter x Hunter, and in particular, I sense strong similarities between Matsuri and Neferpito, who also was the sole member of the Royal Guard to develop empathy as her human trait. As a huge fan of Hunter x Hunter and the Chimera Ant arc, I personally am very excited to make several videos comparing the two entities and seeing what transpires in the Boruto story moving forward. That aside, the flashback back and forth between the current events and Shikamaru presenting the plan was really cool. God forbid Ikimoto draws a black border to differentiate the flashbacks for the current events though. In seeing the cold-hearted but logically effective strategy Shikamaru employs, likely a suggestion from Kashin Koji, juxtaposed with the most humane the Shinju have ever seemed, was really well timed. It amplifies the cruelty of Shikamaru's order, while also displaying the logical effectiveness of that strategy. Now as a quick aside, I'm not surprised that this is the solution to saving the tree captives with the thorn bulbs. I myself predicted that you probably just stick the thorn bulb into the tree and voila, they're free. But I do find it weird that they purposefully dodged the topic of how you save a tree captive with a thorn bulb when it really is just that simple. You stick the bulb into the tree and voila, they're free. Why didn't they just say so the first time? It's not a big deal by any means, but it's just weird. They're almost setting up the expectation for something more grandiose by repeatedly dodging the question the way they did. Anyway though, I'm also glad that while Boruto, Koji, and Shikamaru all intend to dispose of the Shinju regardless due to the immense threat they pose to the world, they did address the fact that the Shinju are more or less innocent cubs acting on instinct to guide them as per Jura's suggestion, meaning they're not inherently evil. And the reason I like this is because not only is it just blatantly true and good to acknowledge, it lays the foundation for 2 layers of internal conflict for our protagonists. First, they have to kill newborn lives that aren't inherently evil. That just sucks for someone with a good heart. And second, that they could, in theory, come to grow fond of some of these Shinju, especially as they continue to develop their humanity and identity, and if any of them decide to live as a human and oppose the instinctive goal of the Tentacles. In which case, someone like Konohamaru would have to, in theory, trade the life of his new friend Matsuri in favor of the life of his old friend Moegi. Obviously, Konohamaru would choose Moegi, but there is an inherent tragedy in making that decision, and it would be a heartbreaking one. That's freaking good. That's how you add emotional turmoil to this story, something I think TBV Vortex desperately needs. Inojin's sacrifice did not hit the standard. Subtleties like these give me hope of the Boruto manga's upward trajectory narratively, but no matter how good the build-up is, the execution of the payoff is equally as important. If the execution is as lackluster as Inojin's sacrifice, or in my opinion, Boruto's Scar and Momoshiki's prophecy, it's just not going to hit home and remain an eternal work of art that Sasori would appreciate. But anyway, interestingly, Matsuri's level of love for Konohamaru seems to rival that of Eida's for Kawaki, with the intense blushing and difficulty breathing, so I think it's safe to say that Konohamaru is gonna end up with Moegi and not Hanabi, as much as I wouldn't blame for Konohamaru for choosing Hanabi. Seeing Konohamaru try to comfort Matsuri, who's clearly feeling some type of way, was not only amusing to me, but it also aligns with what I said earlier about the difficulty of Konohamaru's mission, as I really suspect Konohamaru to grow fond of Matsuri naturally due to his genuine positive, upbeat nature, the fact that Matsuri is Moegi in a sense, and the likely progression of Matsuri's humanity painting her in a positive light, at least from Konohamaru's perspective. I don't think this is going to be a cakewalk mission for Konohamaru. He's bound to falter at some point, and I'm here for it. Now on the other end of the spectrum, I don't think Mitsuki, Sarada, Yodo, or Araya will have much difficulty betraying Ryu, or at least everyone aside from Yodo. But conversely, I also suspect that Ryu might be the one to suspect a betrayal from the Konoha and Sand Shinobi. It's possible that Ryu was completely genuine and innocent with all of his words in this chapter, but I at least partially suspect that Ryu suspects that something's up. Ryu looked pretty serious and sinister when he said, "You know, honestly, I'd been intending to slaughter any ninja I ran into, so I'm glad we spoke first." It almost feels like a threat or a hint as to what he plans to do later. At the very least, I don't think he'll completely lower his guard. Moving on though, I love how they once again emphasize Eida's discomfort with Mamushi watching her. I can't wait for that impending confrontation, and I like the tension between Boruto and Koji. Koji clearly has his own plans for protecting the future, and is content with making sacrifices as needed, much to Boruto's dismay. But there's a good chance this is going to boil over with Kawaki in the future, and once again, I'm here for it. And me being me, I also found it humorous when Boruto asked what the chance Team 7 fails is percentage-wise, and Koji didn't answer genuinely. Boruto thinks he flat out lied when he paused and said, "Not that high," instead of giving Boruto a percentage like he asked for. Instead, Koji stresses that no matter how dire the situation, Boruto cannot go, or else Jura will intervene and Boruto will die this time, which they cannot afford. Which, I'm not gonna lie, I kinda doubt, since it's not like Jura's gonna know anyway, considering he clearly can't sense Boruto and Koji, or else he wouldn't have so much trouble finding Boruto and his mysterious accomplice. Plus, Jura's too busy buying books in the bookstore to even notice Boruto's intervention anyway. So truthfully, this is just plot convenient nonsense to keep Boruto away from this mission in order to amplify the tension. I'm okay with it, but it is nonsense unless Koji later reveals that a certain sacrifice was necessary to ensure that things proceed smoothly, and he purposefully lied to Boruto in order to ensure that would happen. In any case, yeah, Jura went to the bookstore again, and it was pretty funny. He dropped a giant wad of cash on the table as an advance for his future visits, and I have to wonder where he got that money from. Did he steal it? Did he create a counterfeit style by using his wood style to turn it into paper? Did he get a job in a previous chapter to raise funds for his books? No matter the answer, it's still funny. This scene also serves to exemplify more of Jura's character on a deeper level, so much so that I was inspired to make an entire video dedicated to Jura's character and how good it actually is so far. And I'm already about 80% done with that video, so be on the lookout for that this month. And finally, the chapter cliffhanger was simultaneously the coolest and funniest part of the chapter. As Amado begins to smoke, Kawaki walks up behind Amado, yanks a cigarette out of his mouth, slams Amado against the wall with his giant ninja tech hand. Amado says, "I thought you might be dropping by," and Kawaki demands Amado to restore his true power, just like Kon once did back in the Koda. Besides the coolness factor though, given that they've already moved on to this plot point, I'm curious how far they'll take Kawaki in this arc. Will they put this scene on pause and come back to it several chapters later? Will he sit around for the rest of the arc? Will he involve himself in this mission in such a way that he accidentally draws Jura out and takes things off Koji's intended course? Will he confront Jura directly while visiting the bookstore? Will Kawaki inevitably fight Momoshiki instead of Eida or Damon? Will he involve himself in Amado's plan in some way? Will he find himself face to face with Code? The possibilities are plentiful, and it's difficult to say which route they'll take. But if I had to guess based on what's been established so far, I would lean towards Kawaki drawing Jura out in a way Koji didn't intend for Kawaki to become involved with Amado's plans, thus distracting him from the Shinju plotline, or for Kawaki to find himself face to face with Code. I think one of these three options feels the most interesting for the plot and impactful for the narrative, but let me know what you think. Now, as a quick aside, I didn't mention this in my video about Kawaki's limiters, but just this morning I thought of another very specific moment when the limiters could have been activated, and it actually makes the most sense from a power scaling perspective. So I mentioned in that video how Kawaki's Chakra Blast against Garo was pretty insane and objectively larger and more destructive than anything else he ever does, even compared to his Chakra Blast versus Code when he awakens Ishiki's horn. This is a strong indication that Amado didn't install or at least activate the limiters until sometime later on, such as when he reconstructed Kawaki's karma, and narratively, that is still the best time for Amado to have done this for the story. However, this doesn't explain why Kawaki never makes another gigantic explosion like the Garo one during the rest of the Kawaki arc, even during a life or death battle against Boruto to save Naruto. Rather than just blowing up half of Boruto's body, he could have obliterated it entirely, seemingly at least. This leaves us with three possibilities. The first is that Kawaki did do that and the visual depiction was just slightly different, as Garo was somehow only split in half even though Kawaki destroyed the entire cliffside and surrounding area. Granted, you can very easily argue that Garo is just more durable than Boruto, who seems like a puddle of goo. The second is that Kawaki simply drew upon more of the karma's power against Garo than he was ever able to consistently use for the rest of the arc. In other words, he used karma's true essence like Boruto in chapter 64, drawing out as much of the karma's power as possible before reaching the horn state. And the third is that Kawaki was actually limited right after the Garo fight, specifically when he overheated, something Kawaki has never done since, either because it was a drop plot point, or because that's the moment the limiters were activated, meaning it was never actually about Kawaki overheating like a basic ninja duel. After all, Code did emit a bunch of steam when Amado released the limiters in chapter 70. Alternatively, the overheating thing could be legit, but Kawaki hasn't overheated since because his power has been limited, thus preventing him from overheating. Now, am I saying this is definitively the moment Kawaki's limiters were activated? No. I still think when Amado reconstructed Kawaki's karma in the Code arc is probably the best option. It fills in all the other gaps and leaves the strongest impact narratively. I just wanted to mention this other possibility because it came to my mind right before I started reading the chapter, and funny enough, Kawaki confronted Amado about the limiters at the end of the chapter, so that's pretty cool timing. Anyway, that's most of my immediate thoughts on the chapter. I kind of expect this to not be a fan favorite chapter for most people, but honestly, it's probably got the fewest flaws among all Boruto TBV Vortex chapters, outside of maybe chapters 4 and 5. And I think this chapter did a pretty good job of continuing previous plot points and story beats and setting the foundation for new ones as well. Keep in mind, this isn't supposed to be a payoff chapter, but a build-up chapter. Taking the chapter for what it is, I think it serves its function quite nicely. And again, I am biased towards any chapter that aligns with my theory and analysis videos, so don't hate me if I like this chapter more than Hibawari's pancakes. But let me know what you think about this chapter. Is it one of your favorites in TBV Vortex so far? Is it one of your least favorites? Is it right in the middle? What do you think of Matsuri's ability? What do you think about Matsuri's empathy and growing humanity? What do you think about Shikamaru's cold-hearted mission and the difficulty Konohamaru will face in executing it? Do you think Ryu suspects the Konoha and Sand Shinobi will betray them? Do you think they will defeat Ryu? Do you think Shinju will be freed by the end of this arc? What do you think about the tension between Boruto and Koji? What do you think about Jura going to the bookstore again? And what do you expect from Kawaki for the rest of this arc after he gets his limiters removed? Let me know your answers to all of that in the comments below. Watch this video here for more of my content, subscribe and like the video to help me against the YouTube algorithm, and turn on notifications so you don't miss out. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.